In a luxury restaurant, a wheelchair-bound millionaire has his empty routine interrupted by a poor girl who points at the locket around his neck. She claims the woman in the photo looks exactly like her mother and reveals secrets that couldn't have been made up. Caught between doubt and hope, he begins a search that could change both his life and the girl's forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The rain beat against the windows of the Delacroix restaurant when Richard Sterling, at 52 years old, adjusted his wheelchair between the elegantly set tables. The place was nearly empty on this Wednesday afternoon, with just a few executives discussing business in low voices and an elderly couple sharing a bottle of red wine. Richard preferred it this way. Solitude had become his most constant companion over the last 3 years. His fingers toyed absently with the gold chain that hung on his chest, a discreet locket that hid a photograph of Elena, his wife. 3 years since the accident that had taken her and left his legs paralyzed. 3 years since the world had lost all its color and flavor. The filet mignon, cut into small pieces, was growing cold on his plate as he watched the traffic on Park Avenue through the fogged-up glass. The fortune he had built as a real estate mogul seemed increasingly meaningless. Luxury condos, commercial buildings, mansions, it all continued to generate millions, but the money just piled up in accounts he rarely checked. What was the point of all that wealth if he had no one to share it with? Richard took a sip of the Bordeaux and winced. Not even the most refined flavors could cut through the fog of bitterness that enveloped him. Elena always used to joke that he had the palate of a child, preferring simple dishes to elaborate ones. God, he missed her. He missed everything. The sound of bare feet on the polished marble interrupted his melancholy thoughts. A little girl had entered the restaurant, her small feet leaving damp tracks on the floor. She wore a faded blue dress torn at the hem and carried a crinkled plastic bag. Her brown hair was disheveled, stuck to her face, wet from the rain. The waiters immediately moved toward her, their gestures polite but firm, indicating that she should leave. The girl, who looked to be about 7, completely ignored their attempts to remove her. Her eyes scanned the dining room as if searching for something specific, a strange determination for someone so small. Richard watched the scene with growing interest. The child walked past the tables, ignoring the disapproving glances from the other patrons. There was something in her posture that didn't match the appearance of a street kid, a quiet dignity, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. When she stopped in front of his table, Richard felt a shiver run down his spine. The girl's eyes were a deep green, somehow familiar. She didn't hold out her hand for money, didn't speak of hunger or cold. She just stared at him with a disconcerting intensity. "Are you Richard Sterling?" she asked, her voice clear despite her visible nervousness. He frowned. It was strange for a street kid to know his name. "Yes, I am. How did you—" The words died in his throat as the girl pointed to the locket on his neck. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to tremble. "That woman in the picture, she looks just like my mum." Richard felt his blood run cold. Instinctively, his hand closed over the locket, hiding Elena's image. "What are you talking about, little girl? How could you have seen—" "Please, can I see it up close?" she interrupted, holding out a small, dirty hand. "I need to be sure." Against every instinct of self-preservation, Richard opened the locket. The photo of Elena smiled up at them. Wavy blonde hair, bright green eyes, the same sweet expression that had won him over 20 years ago. The girl's reaction was immediate. She let out a sob and covered her face with her hands. "It's her. It's exactly her." "Listen here," Richard said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but my mum had a crescent moon-shaped birthmark on her right shoulder," the girl interrupted, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "She used to sing a song about sunflowers whenever I couldn't sleep. She said sunflowers always find the sun, even on the darkest days." Richard felt the world spin around him. No one knew about Elena's birthmark. Not even their closest friends knew that particular song she had made up. How could a street kid possibly have this information? "That's impossible," he murmured. but his voice came out weak, unconvincing. The girl wiped her nose on the sleeve of her dress. She told me all about you. She said that one day I would need to find you. She said that when the time came I would know. Your mother, where is she? Richard asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. The girl's green eyes filled with sadness. She's not here anymore. It's been 4 months. The restaurant seemed to have disappeared around them. All Richard could see were those green eyes that were frighteningly familiar. What's your name? Laura, she answered. Laura Miller. Laura, he repeated, testing the name. Eleanor had always said that if they ever had a daughter, she'd want to name her Laura. The girl fumbled with her plastic bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope, protected by a clear plastic sleeve. My mum told me to give you this if I ever found you. She said you would understand. With trembling hands, Richard took the envelope. His breath caught when he recognized Elena's delicate handwriting on the front, "To Richard with all my love and regret." The envelope felt heavy in his hands, as if it contained all the truth he hadn't had the courage to discover. Laura stood there, watching his every reaction with those eyes that were like windows to a past he thought he knew completely. She said you might not believe it at first, Laura murmured, but that when you read the letter you'd understand why she never had the courage to tell you. Richard looked at the envelope, then at the girl, then back at the envelope. 3 years of mourning, 3 years of believing that Elena had taken all her secrets with her. And now a child had appeared out of nowhere, carrying posthumous words that promised to shake everything he thought he knew about the woman he had loved. Richard closed his eyes and took a deep breath before opening the envelope. His hands were shaking, so much he nearly tore the yellowed paper. The letter was folded carefully, Elena's familiar handwriting dancing before his eyes, blurred by the tears that insisted on forming. My dearest Richard, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means Laura has kept the promise she made to me. It also means that I am no longer by your side to explain in person the lie I have carried for all these years. The following words hit Richard like physical blows. Eleanor confessed to having discovered her pregnancy a few months before the accident, but had chosen to hide the truth out of fear. Fear that he wasn't ready to be a father, fear that the responsibility would change their relationship, fear that she wouldn't be a good mother. I created a parallel life that you never knew existed, the letter continued. During the last few months of our life together, I divided my time between our home and a small apartment in Queens, where our daughter was growing up away from the spotlight and expectations. Laura was born 3 days after the accident, 3 days after I lost you forever. Richard had to stop reading. His chest burned, as if someone had torn a hole in the center of his being. Laura remained standing by the table, watching him with a patience that didn't match her age. Her green eyes, the same as Eleanor's, were filled with a premature understanding of pain. Are you okay? Laura asked, her small voice filled with genuine concern. He couldn't answer. How could he be okay, discovering that the woman he loved had a secret daughter? How could he be okay, knowing that Eleanor had died holding a secret that would change everything? Richard returned to the letter, forcing himself to continue. Eleanor described Laura's first years, the sleepless nights, the first steps, the first words. It had all happened without his knowledge. While he was mourning her absence, a miniature version of her was growing up somewhere in the city. Laura is smart like you and stubborn like me, Elena had written. She constantly asks about her father, and I always tell her stories about a brave and kind man she will meet when the time is right. I never had the courage to tell her the truth about the accident, about what happened to you, about how I chose to protect her from a reality that could hurt her. The tears finally overflowed. Richard hadn't cried since Elena's funeral, but now the sobs came in uncontrollable waves. Laura approached timidly and touched his hand with small, calloused fingers. Mum said you'd be sad at first, she murmured, but that you'd understand later. The letter ended with a desperate plea. If anything happens to me, please take care of our Laura. She deserves to know the extraordinary father I always dreamed you would be. Forgive me for hiding the greatest gift life ever gave us. With all my eternal love, Elena. There was a date at the bottom of the letter, 2 weeks before the accident. Elena had already been planning to tell him everything. Fate had intervened before she found the courage. Richard folded the letter with reverent care and looked at Laura. She truly had Elena's features, the shape of her face, the color of her eyes, even the way she tilted her head when she was thoughtful. But there was something of him there too, he realized now, the shape of his nose, the determined line of his jaw. "Laura," he said, testing the name on his lips, "how long has your mother you've been gone?" 4 months and 17 days, she answered, with a precision that broke his heart. She got sick all of a sudden. The doctors said her heart just stopped working right. Peripartum cardiomyopathy, probably. Richard knew enough about medicine to know that some women developed heart problems after childbirth, sometimes years later. Eleanor had died from complications of a pregnancy he never knew existed. "And where have you been living since then?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "With our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, but she said she can't keep me much longer. Her apartment is small, and she already has 4 grandkids." Laura looked down. "That's why I came looking for you. Mom said that when I had no one left, you would help me." Guilt hit Richard like an avalanche. For 4 months, his daughter, had been living in uncertainty, depending on the kindness of strangers while he wallowed in his own grief. If Elena had told him the truth before the accident, how many things would have been different? "Come with me," he said, signaling for the waiter to bring the check. "Let's get out of here." Laura hesitated. "Where are we going?" "To a safe place. You must be hungry. You need clean clothes, a warm bath." Richard took his coat from the back of the chair. "And we have a lot more to talk about." The drive to the Plaza Hotel was silent. Laura was mesmerized by the tall buildings, the illuminated storefronts, the bustle of the city seen through the windows of the modified car. Richard watched her every reaction in the rearview mirror, searching for more similarities, for more proof that this impossible revelation was real. At the hotel, the receptionist barely concealed her surprise at seeing Richard arrive with a visibly destitute child. He requested the presidential suite, ignored the curious glances, and took Laura straight to the elevator. Inside the luxurious room, Laura spun around slowly, her mouth agape at the gilded furniture, the silk curtains, the panoramic view of Central Park. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "Mom always said that one day I would see places like this." Richard called room service and ordered children's clothes from several stores in the attached mall, along with a full dinner. While they waited, Laura took the longest bath of her life, and when she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a fluffy hotel robe, she looked like a completely different child. "Tomorrow we're going to run some tests," Richard explained as she devoured the hamburger she had ordered. "Blood tests, nothing that will hurt, just to be absolutely sure." Laura stopped chewing. "You don't believe I'm your daughter?" The question cut deep. "I want to believe it," he admitted, "but I need to be sure. It's important for both of us." She nodded with adult-like seriousness. "Mom said you were a careful man, that you always checked everything twice before making important decisions." For the next 3 nights, Richard couldn't sleep properly. He shared the suite with Laura, watching her sleep on the sofa bed, looking for more signs of familiarity. She talked in her sleep, sometimes calling for Mommy Elena, other times murmuring about sunflowers and lullabies. On the 3rd day, the test results arrived. Dr. Henry Morgan, a geneticist from the lab, delivered the envelope personally to the hotel. Richard opened it with hands that trembled more than they had the day he read Elena's letter. 99.97% compatibility, he read aloud. Paternity confirmed. Laura, who was playing with a puzzle on the coffee table, looked up. "Does that mean you're my dad?" Richard slowly folded the paper and walked over to her. For the first time since the accident, he knelt on the floor, ignoring the pain in his paralyzed legs. He took her small hands in his. "It means you're my daughter, Laura. My daughter that I never knew existed." She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen since they met. "Can I call you Dad?" The word hit Richard like a lightning bolt. Dad was something he never thought he would hear. For years, he and Elena had tried to have children without success. Now he, discovered he'd had a daughter for 7 years. "You can," he whispered, hugging her for the first time as a father. "You can call me Dad." But as Laura snuggled into his arms, Richard couldn't shake a growing sense of panic. He knew nothing about being a father. He didn't know how to care for a child, how to raise her, how to protect her. And there was his family, the uncles, cousins, and lawyers who would certainly question the sudden appearance of an heir. When Laura fell asleep that night, Richard called Marcus, his younger brother and the family's attorney. "Richard, are you okay? It's 2 a.m. Marcus, I need to tell you something that's going to change everything." Marcus arrived at the hotel at 7 a.m, still in a wrinkled suit from the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, and he carried a briefcase he wouldn't let go of for a second. Richard was waiting for him on the suite's balcony, sipping coffee while watching Laura sleep on the sofa bed. "So," Marcus said without preamble, "you have a 7-year-old daughter who showed up out of nowhere with a letter from Elena, and the DNA test confirms it." He poured himself some coffee with shaky hands. "Richard, do you have any idea what a bombshell this is?" "She's my daughter, Marcus, not a bombshell. From a legal and financial standpoint, she's exactly a bombshell." Marcus opened his briefcase and spread documents across the table. "You have a fortune valued at $200 million, properties in 3 states, shares in 15 companies, international investments, and now a legitimate heir appears." Richard frowned. "What's the problem? She's my daughter. She's entitled to all of it." "The problem is the other beneficiaries in your current will." Marcus pulled out a specific document. "Your nieces and nephews, the Elena Sterling Foundation, your company's employees. They are all going to question this child's legitimacy. The DNA test can be contested. There could be claims of fraud, of manipulation. You know our cousins, Richard. Anthony always thought he deserved a bigger stake in the company. Catherine is going through an expensive divorce. They won't accept this quietly." Laura stirred on the couch, murmuring something about sunflowers. Richard lowered his voice. "So what do you suggest?" "A full investigation, the mother's medical history, birth records, an investigation into this Mrs. Peterson. And most importantly," Marcus hesitated, "we need to find out if anyone else knew about her." "Why?" "Because if someone else knew and stayed silent all these years, it could mean they're planning something now." The conversation was interrupted by Laura waking up. She stretched like a cat, blinked to get her bearings, and smiled when she saw Richard. "Good morning, Dad." Marcus choked on his coffee. Hearing the word Dad directed at his brother hit him in an unexpected way. Richard went over to the girl and helped her up. "Laura, this is my brother, Marcus. Marcus, this is Laura, my daughter." Marcus studied the girl's face with professional attention. The resemblances were undeniable, but he had learned to be suspicious of convenient coincidences. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Laura." "Are you a lawyer like Dad said?" she asked, curious. "I am, and I'm going to help your dad take the best possible care of you." After breakfast, Richard took Laura to buy clothes and toys at a nearby mall. It was strange to watch a child discover things he took for granted. Colorful window displays, escalators, ice cream in dozens of flavors. Laura behaved with a mix of wonder and caution, as if she feared it could all disappear at any moment. "Can I pick any dress?" she asked in the third store, shyly touching a pink dress with little flowers on it. "Anyone you want." She picked only the essentials, 3 simple dresses, basic shoes, a coat. Even when Richard insisted she choose more, Laura shook her head. "Mom always said you should only take what you really need." The girl's premature wisdom broke Richard's heart. While they were shopping, he got a call from Beatrice, the housekeeper at his mansion for the past 15 years. "Mr. Sterling, Marcus told me about the girl. When are you coming home?" "Tomorrow, Beatrice, and you... What do you think of all this?" There was a long pause. "Sir, I knew Mrs. Elena very well. If this girl is her daughter, I'll know the moment I see her." That night at the hotel, Laura asked a question Richard hadn't expected. "Dad, why do you use a wheelchair?" He had rehearsed several answers for when the time came to explain the accident, but the girl's direct question caught him off guard. "I was in an accident 3 years ago." "The same accident where your Mom told me," Laura interrupted softly. She said you got really hurt trying to save her. Your mother said that. Laura nodded. She always said you were very brave, that you tried to protect her even when the car was on fire. Richard felt a wave of emotion. Elena had never blamed him for the accident, even when he blamed himself every day for not being able to save her. Knowing she had told the story that way to Laura was a gift he never expected to receive. "Does it hurt?" Laura asked, gently touching the arm of the wheelchair. "Sometimes, but it's getting better. Can I help you with anything?" The simple, sincere offer from a 7-year-old broke something inside him. "You're already helping me just by being here." The next day they left the hotel for the mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. Laura was silent the whole way, watching the houses get bigger and farther apart. When they stopped in front of the electronic gate of Richard's property, she swallowed hard. "You live here." "We live here," he corrected. The mansion had 3 floors, immense gardens, and a view of the Long Island Sound. Beatrice was waiting for them at the main entrance, a 60-year-old woman with a stern expression but kind eyes. The moment she saw Laura getting out of the car, her expression changed completely. "Good heavens," she whispered, bringing a hand to her chest. "It's her. She looks just like Mrs. Eleanor as a child." Laura hid behind Richard, intimidated by the size of the house and the intensity of Beatrice's reaction. The housekeeper knelt to be at the girl's level. "You have the same green eyes as your mommy," she said in a choked voice, "and the same shy way she had when she was nervous." "You knew my mom when she was little?" Laura asked, curious. "I did, dear. Your mother was like a daughter to me." Richard watched the interaction with growing interest. Beatrice had never mentioned knowing Elena before their marriage, another piece of a puzzle he didn't know existed. In the following days, Laura explored the mansion with restrained curiosity. She was impressed by everything: the library with hundreds of books, the private movie theater, the rooftop pool. But she didn't touch anything without permission. It was as if she were visiting a museum, not her new home. The nights were especially difficult. Laura had frequent nightmares, waking up crying and calling for Eleanor. Richard learned to sit by her bed until she fell back asleep, holding her small hand and quietly singing the sunflower song Eleanor had taught her. It was during one of those nights that Laura made a confession that would change everything again. "Dad," she whispered in the dark, "there's something I didn't tell you." "What is it, sweetie?" Mom wasn't alone when she got sick. There was a man who used to visit her sometimes. He always brought medicine and told her not to tell anyone about you two. Richard felt his blood run cold. "What kind of man?" "A doctor. He wore a white coat and had a black bag. Mom always got really nervous when he came over." "Laura, this man, did he know about me?" She nodded slowly. "He asked about you a lot. He wanted to know if Mom had told you anything, if you knew about me. Mom always said no." Richard sat on the edge of the bed, processing the information. Someone had known about Laura's existence before she arrived. Someone had been monitoring Elena, possibly controlling her. "Laura, do you remember this doctor's name?" "Dr. Cole. Mom called him Dr. Cole." In the early hours of the morning, Richard called Marcus. "I need you to investigate a Dr. Cole. And Marcus, I think our family has been watched for a lot longer than we imagined." Marcus arrived at the mansion 3 days later with a folder full of disturbing findings. His face was tense as he sat in the living room, waiting for Laura to go play in the garden with Beatrice before he started talking. "Richard, you're not going to like what I found out about Dr. Cole." Richard adjusted his wheelchair to face his brother. "Tell me everything." "Fernando Cole, a doctor for 20 years, specializing in cardiology. But 5 years ago, he lost his medical license for prescribing controlled substances without medical indication." Marcus opened the first page of the report. He was investigated for blackmailing wealthy patients using confidential medical information as leverage. Blackmail? He would discover secrets through their medical records, extramarital affairs that resulted in diseases, prescription drug addictions, health problems that could affect business deals. Then, he'd use that information to extort money. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. You think he was blackmailing Elena? It's possible, but there's something worse. Marcus turned a few more pages. Cole isn't working alone. He's part of a network of people who specialize in uncovering the secrets of wealthy families. Lawyers, accountants, domestic staff, doctors. An organized network? Yes. And Richard, they have a file on our family that dates back to even before your marriage to Elena. The implications hit Richard like a punch to the gut. They knew about the pregnancy from the beginning. Probably, and if Elena was paying to keep the secret quiet, then when she died, they lost their source of income. Richard completed the thought. That's why they sent Laura to me. It wasn't a coincidence, it was planned. Marcus nodded gravely. A 7-year-old girl couldn't have located you on her own, wouldn't know your schedule, your favorite places. Someone coached her on where and when to find you. The revelation was like a stab wound. Richard had started to believe that meeting Laura was fate, a second chance life was offering him. To discover it was all manipulated destroyed the magic of those first moments. But the DNA test doesn't lie, he said, clinging to what he knew was true. She is my daughter. I don't question that. What I question are the motives of whoever brought her to you. Marcus closed the folder. Richard, you need to be prepared. If this network exists and was extorting Elena, they now have direct access to our family through Laura. You think she knows anything? Not necessarily. Children are perfect tools because they're innocent. But someone could be using her to get information about you, the company, our finances. Richard looked out at the garden where Laura was playing with a doll on the grass. She looked so small, so fragile. The idea that she could be used as a pawn in a dangerous game filled him with rage and despair. That night at dinner, Richard watched Laura with renewed attention. She ate slowly, still not used to the abundance of food. Occasionally she would look at him as if expecting it all to disappear at any moment. Laura, he said carefully, do you remember anything else about Dr. Cole? Anything he asked or did? She stopped eating and frowned. He always asked if Mom talked about money, if you sent anything for us. And what did your mom say? That you didn't know I existed, but he didn't believe her. Laura looked down. Once I heard him talking on the phone. He said that when Mom died, I would be useful for something. The coldness of the phrase struck Richard like a bolt of lightning. A 7-year-old shouldn't know that kind of cruelty. Laura, after your mum got sick, who took care of you? Mrs. Peterson, but she went out a lot. Sometimes Dr. Cole would stay with me. He taught me things. What kind of things? Laura hesitated as if she instinctively knew she was treading on dangerous ground. He taught me where you lived, where you usually went to eat. He showed me pictures of you in magazines. He said that if I was ever all alone, I should look for you and tell you about Mom. Richard felt sick. It had all been meticulously orchestrated. Laura wasn't just a lost daughter who had found him by chance. She was a child trained to approach him at the right moment. Laura, do you know where Dr. Cole lives? I do. Mom used to take me there sometimes when she went to get medicine. Richard exchanged a meaningful look with Beatrice, who had stopped clearing the table to listen to the conversation. The housekeeper had worked for wealthy families long enough to recognize the signs of danger. After Laura went to bed, Richard called Marcus again. We need to act before they make their next move. What do you have in mind? I'm going to confront this Dr. Cole. Find out exactly what he wants and how we can get out of this situation. Richard, that's dangerous. If they're as organized as they seem, confronting them directly could put you and Laura at risk. And leaving things as they are doesn't. Marcus was silent for a moment. I'll go with you, and we're bringing security. The next morning, while Laura was having breakfast with Beatrice, Richard received a call that would change everything once more. It was from the private school where he planned to enroll her. Mr. Sterling, there's a problem with your daughter's documentation. We tried to locate her official birth certificate, but it seems there are some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? The father's name on the document doesn't match yours. It's registered as Father Unknown, but there's a later handwritten note. That's been scratched out. Richard felt the floor disappear from under him. "I'll be there in person to check on this." When he hung up the phone, Laura was standing in the doorway, still in her pajamas, with tears in her eyes. "Dad, are you not going to want me around anymore?" "Why would you say that?" "Because I heard you talking about problems with my papers. And last night I heard you and Uncle Marcus talking about Dr. Cole." She sobbed. "Mom always said that if people found out the truth about us, they wouldn't want us around anymore." Richard opened his arms, and Laura ran to him, climbing onto his wheelchair to settle in his lap as she had in the first few days at the hotel. "Laura, no matter what we find out, you will always be my daughter. Nothing will ever change that." "Even if you find out Mom lied about something?" The question hit Richard right in the chest. "Even then." But as he comforted Laura, a terrible doubt began to grow in his mind. What if Elena wasn't the only person who had lied? What if the entire story he thought he knew was just a carefully constructed version of the truth? That afternoon, while Laura played in the garden, Richard found Beatrice putting away clothes in the girl's room. The housekeeper was quieter than usual, avoiding his gaze. "Beatrice," he said, "how long did you know Elena before she married me?" The housekeeper stopped folding clothes, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Sterling, is that important now?" "It's very important. Laura said you knew Elena when she was a child." Beatrice sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "Sir, there are things about Mrs. Elena's past that might be better left buried." "Beatrice, my daughter is involved in something dangerous. I need to know everything." The housekeeper sighed deeply. "Elena wasn't her real name when I met her, and she wasn't from a wealthy family like she always said. Her name was Mariana, and she was my neighbor's daughter from a poor neighborhood." Richard felt the world spin around him once again. "What do you mean?" "She changed her name, invented a past, got fake documents, all to marry you." Beatrice looked him directly in the eye. "And, sir, I don't think she was the only one who lied about who she really was." Richard stared at Beatrice, trying to process what he had just heard. "What did you mean by, she wasn't the only one who lied?" The housekeeper avoided his gaze, nervously fidgeting with the folds of her apron. "Sir, some things are dangerous to talk about." "Beatrice, my daughter could be in danger. I need to know everything, no matter how dangerous it is." She took a deep breath and closed the bedroom door. "Mariana, Elena, she came to me 8 years ago. She said she was in love with a rich man, but that he would never be interested in a poor girl from the suburbs. And then, she asked me for help to invent a new identity. I knew people who did that kind of thing, people who created fake pasts for those who could pay." Beatrice sat down again. "But, sir, she wasn't the only person who ordered a new identity back then." Richard's heart pounded. "Who else?" "A young man. Someone who wanted to erase his own past and become someone else. Someone who was also interested in getting close to wealthy families." Richard felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "Do you know this man?" Beatrice looked him directly in the eye. "Sir, don't you remember meeting Elena in a very convenient way, at a time in your life when you were vulnerable?" The memory hit Richard like a thunderclap. Elena had appeared in his life right after he became the sole heir to the family fortune, when his parents died in a plane crash. She had been at the hospital the day he got the news, working as a volunteer. Beautiful, caring, showing up at the exact moment he needed comfort the most. "Are you implying our meeting was planned?" "Sir, I've worked for wealthy families for 40 years. I've seen this kind of situation before." Beatrice lowered her voice. "People get close to heirs when they're vulnerable. Elena was no different." Richard felt the world collapsing around him for the 3rd time in a week. "But she loved me. I'm sure she loved me. It may have started as a scheme, but it became real love. I saw the way she looked at you, how she cared for you." Beatrice gently touched his arm. "And Laura is proof that your love was real, sir." Just then, Laura ran into the room, still playing with her doll. Seeing the serious expressions on the adults' faces, she stopped immediately. "Did something happen?" "No, sweetie. We were just talking about boring grown-up stuff." Richard forced a smile. "How about we go get some ice cream?" Laura hesitated, clearly sensing that something was wrong. "Dad, are you sad again?" The girl's perceptiveness constantly surprised him. "A little, but it'll pass." "Can I ask you an important question?" "Of course. If you find out that Mom did bad things before she had me, will you still love me?" The question struck Richard right in the heart. How could a 7-year-old have so much emotional wisdom? "Laura, it doesn't matter what your mother did or didn't do. You are my daughter, and I will love you forever. Even if you find out some people lied to you? Especially then, because you never lied to me." Laura ran to hug him, climbing onto his wheelchair with the ease of someone who was already used to it. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, my princess." That night, after Laura had fallen asleep, Richard called Marcus. "We need to talk urgently. Get over here now." Marcus arrived, an hour later, finding Richard on the balcony looking out at the water. "What happened?" "Eleanor's real name wasn't Elena. It was Mariana, a poor girl who created a fake identity to marry me." Marcus sat down heavily in the chair next to him. "How did you find out?" "Beatrice told me, and there's more. She implied that Elena wasn't the only one who created a new identity back then." "You think others are involved?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Richard rubbed his temples. "Marcus, what if our family has been manipulated for years? What if the accident wasn't an accident?" "Richard, you're being paranoid. The accident was investigated, a flat tire, rain, a dangerous curve." "But what if the tire was sabotaged? What if someone wanted Elena out of the way because she knew too much?" Marcus fell silent, processing the implications. "If that's true, Laura could be in real danger." "Exactly. That's why I need to confront this Dr. Cole as soon as possible." The next day, they left Laura with Beatrice and 2 security guards and headed to the address the girl had provided. Dr. Fernando Cole's apartment was in a modest building in the city center, a far cry from the places a successful doctor would frequent. Cole met them at the door as if he had been expecting them. He was a thin, nervous man in his 50s, with small, constantly shifting eyes. His apartment was a mess, with papers scattered everywhere. "Mr. Sterling," he said with a forced smile, "I figured you'd come looking for me sooner or later." "Then you know why I'm here?" "I know perfectly well. You want answers about Elena, about Mariana, about your daughter." Cole sat in a worn-out armchair. "The question is, how much are you willing to pay for those answers?" Marcus stepped forward. "We're not paying anything, we just want the truth." Cole laughed bitterly. "The truth? You have no idea what you're asking for. The truth about Elena, about Mariana, is far more complex than you can imagine." "Then tell us," Richard said coldly. "Mariana was my patient 10 years ago. She had a congenital heart condition that made it unsafe for her to have children. I treated her, cured her, and in gratitude, she told me about her plans." "What plans?" "She had fallen in love with a wealthy young businessman, but knew he'd never be interested in a poor girl. So she decided to reinvent herself." Cole lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "But she wasn't alone in this plan. Who else was involved? Someone you know very well. Someone who also had an interest in getting close to the Sterling family fortune." Cole took a long drag. "Someone who pretended to be a friend while planning to take everything." Richard felt his blood run cold. "Who?" "Did your brother Marcus ever tell you he knew Elena before you two were married? That he was the one who introduced you?" Richard turned slowly to Marcus, who was as pale as a sheet. "Marcus, is that true?" Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times before he could speak. "Richard, I can explain." "Then explain." I met Mariana first. She came to me because she knew I was your brother. She wanted me to introduce her to you. And you agreed. She offered me money, a lot of money, and I had gambling debts, Richard. Debts that could have destroyed me." The revelation hit Richard like an avalanche. His own brother had orchestrated his marriage for money. "How much did she pay you, Marcus?" $500,000. "But Richard, after you two met, the love between you became real. I swear it became real." Cole laughed loudly. "Real? You want to know what was real?" Elena really did fall in love with Richard. So much so that when she found out she was pregnant, she panicked, because she knew that if he ever found out about the original plan, she would lose everything. Is that why she hid the pregnancy? Exactly, and that's why she hired me to help her keep the secret. I wasn't blackmailing her, Richard. I was protecting her. Richard looked at Marcus, then at Cole, trying to separate truth from lies. If you were protecting Elena, why did you send Laura to me now? Cole and Marcus exchanged a meaningful look. It was Marcus who answered, because Elena left a specific letter to be delivered only in an emergency. A letter that changed everything we knew about the situation. What letter? Cole stood up and went to a drawer from which he pulled a sealed envelope. This letter, Richard. Elena wrote it a few days before she died, and in it she reveals who really sent her to get close to you, and it wasn't her idea. Richard took the envelope with trembling hands. On the paper was written, "To Richard, the truth about who really controls our family." As he opened the letter and began to read, his face grew paler and paler. Elena's words revealed a conspiracy far greater than he had ever imagined, and the name of the person responsible for it all was someone he trusted completely. Elena's letter trembled in Richard's hands as he read each word with growing horror. The familiar handwriting now carried the weight of devastating revelations that shattered everything he thought he knew about his own life. "My dearest Richard," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means you have finally discovered that our marriage began as a sham. But you need to know that the sham was not my idea. I was just a pawn in a much larger game, orchestrated by someone who has always been by your side." Richard paused, looking at Marcus, who was visibly on edge. "Keep reading," Marcus murmured. "You need to know everything. The person who first approached me was not Marcus, it was Beatrice, your housekeeper, who has worked for your family for 15 years, offered me $500,000 to get close to you and marry you. She said she was following orders from someone very powerful, someone who wanted to control your inheritance through a manipulated marriage." The next words made Richard feel as if the floor were disappearing beneath him. Beatrice, whom he considered almost a second mother, who had cared for him during the most difficult times after the accident, was part of a conspiracy against him. Beatrice explained that you were too honest and independent to be controlled directly, so the strategy was to place someone close to you, someone you would trust completely, to influence your financial and business decisions. Initially, I was supposed to just marry you and slowly convince you to make specific investments and changes to your will. Richard dropped the letter and looked at Cole. "Beatrice is at my house right now, with Laura." "Keep reading," Cole said urgently. "The letter explains everything." With even shakier hands, Richard resumed reading. "But Richard, something no one expected happened. I truly fell in love with you. The love I felt was stronger than any amount of money. That's why I could never go through with the original plan. That's why I never tried to influence your financial or business decisions. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I knew that if you discovered the original plan, you would reject me completely. But I also knew that Beatrice and the person behind her would never forgive me for failing the mission. That's why I hid the pregnancy, to protect our daughter from being used as another pawn in their game." The letter continued with details that broke Richard's heart. Elena described how Beatrice constantly pressured her to follow the original plan, how she received subtle threats about consequences for the child if she didn't cooperate. "The person behind all of this is someone you consider family, Richard, someone who has always shown concern for your well-being, but who in reality wants to control the entire sterling fortune. And now that I am dying, I know they will use Laura to get to you." Richard turned the page, reaching the end of the letter. The name of the person responsible for all of this is... At that moment, his cell phone rang. It was Beatrice, and her voice was strained. "Mr. Sterling, you need to come home immediately." "What happened?" "It's Laura, sir. She felt sick and fainted. I've already called an ambulance." Richard felt the world spin. "We're on our way." When he hung up, Cole and Marcus were looking at him with panicked expressions. "Beatrice knows you came here," Cole said. "If she's really involved in this..." "Laura could be in danger," Richard finished, stuffing the letter in his pocket. "Let's go." The drive back to the mansion was desperate. Richard called Beatrice repeatedly, but she no longer answered. Marcus drove at a dangerous speed through the streets, while Cole explained details about the network that manipulated wealthy families. They are extremely organized, Cole was saying. They place trusted people inside the homes, housekeepers, drivers, accountants, doctors. Then they use these people to influence decisions or create situations that benefit their investments. And Beatrice has been a part of this for 15 years. Probably since your parents died. The timing of her hiring was very convenient, don't you think? Richard vaguely remembered how Beatrice had come into his life, right after his parents' funeral, when he was devastated and needed someone to manage the house. She had been recommended by he couldn't remember who. When they arrived at the mansion, the ambulance was already leaving. Richard went straight to Laura's room, where he found only scattered clothes and signs of a struggle. One of the girl's dolls was broken on the floor. "Beatrice!" he yelled, searching the house. "Beatrice!" The housekeeper appeared on the staircase, descending slowly. Her face was different, colder, more calculating. The maternal warmth she had always shown had vanished completely. "She's not here anymore, Mr. Sterling." "Where is my daughter?" "In a safe place. For now." Marcus positioned himself behind Richard, clearly prepared for anything. Cole remained near the door. "Beatrice, if you've hurt Laura—" "I would never hurt a child," she interrupted. "But you need to understand that you're in no position to make threats." "What do you want?" "We want what we've always wanted. Control over the Sterling family's investments. Access to the bank accounts, a say in the business decisions." Beatrice descended a few more steps. Elena was supposed to achieve that through marriage, but she fell in love and complicated everything. "And now you want to use Laura as a hostage?" "Laura is the legitimate heir to a $200 million fortune. With you out of the way, she would need a legal guardian, someone who can make decisions for her until she turns 18. The plan was becoming clear. "And you want to be the guardians?" "Exactly. With you suffering a tragic accident, Laura would be placed under the guardianship of close relatives, relatives who can be easily influenced." Richard looked at Marcus, who was ashen. "Is Marcus part of this too?" "Marcus is just a useful pawn, just like Elena was, just like you have been all these years." Beatrice smiled coldly. "The difference is that now you know the truth." "Where is Laura?" "In a place where she is learning about her new reality. When you are ready to cooperate, you can see her again." Richard felt a rage he had never experienced before. "If you touch a single hair on my daughter's head—" "You're in a wheelchair, Richard. You're in no position to make threats." Beatrice reached the bottom of the stairs. "But I can make you an offer, sign a few documents transferring financial power of attorney, and Laura comes home. It's that simple." "And if I refuse?" "Then Laura will grow up far away from here, believing her father abandoned her. She will be raised by people who will teach her about her new reality, about how her father chose money over his own daughter." The cruelty of the proposal hit Richard in the chest. They didn't just want to steal his fortune. They wanted to destroy any chance of a relationship with Laura. "I need time to think." "You have until noon tomorrow. After that, Laura disappears permanently." Beatrice walked to the door. "And Richard, don't try to find us. We have people watching your every move." After Beatrice left, Richard, Marcus, and Cole stood in silence in the devastated room. The house that had been a home for so many years now felt like a prison. "Richard," Marcus said finally, "I know you have no reason to trust me, but we are going to find Laura." "How?" "We have no idea where she is." Cole cleared his throat. "Actually, I might know a few possibilities. This organization has specific locations where they keep people when they need cooperation." Richard looked at the doctor with renewed hope. "You know these places." "I know 3 possibilities, but we'll need to be very careful. If they realize we're looking, they could move Laura far away from here." That night, as they planned how to find Laura, Richard finished reading Elena's letter. The name of the person behind the entire conspiracy was on the last line, and when he read it, he felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The person orchestrating everything, who had been controlling his life for 15 years, who had now kidnapped his daughter, was someone he would never have suspected. The name on the last line of Elena's letter hit Richard like a bullet to the chest. Anthony Sterling, your own cousin, who has always pretended to care about you. Anthony, the cousin who had comforted him at his parents' funeral, who visited him weekly after the accident, who always expressed concern about his loneliness and depression, who in reality had been orchestrating every aspect of his life for 15 years. Impossible, Richard murmured, rereading the name several times. Anthony has always been like a brother to me. Cole nodded gravely. That's exactly why it worked for so long. Who would suspect someone so close? Marcus paced the room. Richard, this explains so much. Anthony always knew details about your finances that even I didn't. He was always offering investment advice. And I always took it because I trusted him completely. Richard felt sick as he realized how he had been manipulated. How many financial decisions did I make based on his advice? Probably a lot. And they all likely benefited companies he has a stake in. Cole lit another cigarette. These organizations are patient. They work for decades to gain total control. Richard's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he answered immediately, hoping for news of Laura. Dad? The girl's voice was weak, frightened. Dad, where are you? Laura, sweetheart, are you okay? Where are you? I don't know. It's a dark place and there are a lot of strange people here. They said you don't want me anymore. Richard felt tears stream down his face. That's not true, Princess. Dad loves you more than anything in the world. I'm looking for you. They said you prefer money, that you're going to leave me here forever. Laura, listen very carefully to what Dad is about to say. I am going to find you, no matter what. You are the most important thing in my life. The call was abruptly cut off. Richard tried calling back, but the number was out of service. The pain in his chest was physical, as if someone was squeezing his heart in their hands. They're using her to break me, he said, wiping his eyes. A 7-year-old child being manipulated into believing her father abandoned her. Cole put out his cigarette. Richard, I need to tell you something about the places where they might be holding Laura. They aren't physically dangerous, but they are designed to break people psychologically. What do you mean? They isolate people, create false narratives, engage in gradual brainwashing. With children, the process is faster. In a few days, Laura could start to truly believe you've abandoned her. The urgency of the situation hit Richard like an avalanche. They didn't just have to find Laura, they had to find her quickly, before the kidnappers could destroy her trust in him. Where are these places? Marcus asked. One is a farm in upstate New York, another is a house on the Jersey Shore, the third is an apartment in downtown Manhattan. Cole took a piece of paper and began to draw a map. But they're all under 24-hour surveillance. We can't just show up. So what do? We need a plan, and we need to find out exactly where Laura is before we act. Richard picked up the phone and called Anthony. He needed to confirm his suspicions, even if it was dangerous. Richard, Anthony answered with the same warm voice as always. How are you, cousin? I heard a little girl showed up claiming to be your daughter. The hypocrisy in Anthony's voice filled Richard with pure rage. Yes, she did, and now she's disappeared. Disappeared? What do you mean? Someone took her from my house today, someone who wanted me to sign documents transferring financial power of attorney. There was an almost imperceptible pause before Anthony replied. My God, Richard, that's terrible. Have you called the police? Not yet. I'm trying to handle this internally. You should be careful, cousin. Strangers showing up with claims of kinship, it could be a scam. Richard clenched his fists. Anthony was testing the waters, trying to figure out how much he knew. Could be, but the DNA test confirmed it. She really is my daughter. What a complicated situation. If you need anything, any help at all, you can count on me. You know I've always been by your side. I know, Anthony, always. When he hung up, Richard looked at Marcus and Cole. He knows everything. His voice changed when I mentioned the financial documents. Then we need to act fast, Cole said. If Anthony realizes you suspect him, he might order them to move Laura. Marcus approached Richard. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. You call Anthony again. Tell him you've decided to cooperate, that you want to sign the papers. Set up a meeting with him tomorrow. And then, while you're distracting him, Cole and I will go to the 3 possible locations to look for Laura." Richard shook his head. "It's too risky. If they realize it's a trap—" "It's our only chance," Cole interrupted. "If you don't show up by noon tomorrow, as Beatrice demanded, they could move Laura permanently." The decision was impossible. Cooperating meant handing over his fortune and possibly never regaining control. Not cooperating meant risking losing Laura forever. "There's a third option," Richard said finally. "I sign the papers." "Richard, no!" "Let me finish. I sign the papers, but first I demand to see Laura. Once she's with me safe, we'll deal with the financial fallout later." Marcus and Cole exchanged worried glances. "Richard, if you sign those documents, it could take years to reverse. They'll have legal control over everything. Money can be recovered. My daughter can't." That night, Richard barely slept. He stayed in the living room, looking at photos of Laura on his phone, the few they had taken together over the past week. In just a few days, she had become the center of his life. The thought of losing her was unbearable. At 3 in the morning, his phone rang. Again. It was another unknown number. "Hello?" "Dad." Laura's voice was even weaker. "They said you're not coming to get me." "Laura, that's not true. Dad is coming to get you tomorrow." "They showed me a paper saying you don't want me because I'm not really your daughter." Richard felt his heart shatter. They were playing with a child's mind, destroying her self-esteem and trust. "Laura, listen to me. You are my daughter. The blood test proved it. I love you more than anything in the world." "But they said—" "They're lying, sweetie. Bad people sometimes lie to children, but Dad never lies to you. I'm scared. I know, Princess, but be brave just a little bit longer. Tomorrow Dad is coming to get you, and they will never be able to separate us again." The call was cut off again, but this time Richard had heard something important in the background. Classical music playing softly. It was a small clue, but maybe enough for Cole to identify the location. "Classical music," he said to Cole. "In the background of the call. Does that help?" Cole's eyes lit up. "Yes. The apartment in downtown Manhattan has a music conservatory on the floor below. That's where she is." "Then let's go get her now." "Richard, it's an obvious trap. They want you to show up there, desperate. There will be security, armed men." "I don't care." Marcus put a hand on Richard's shoulder. "Cousin, if you die trying to save her, she'll be an orphan. That doesn't help anyone." Richard knew they were right, but every second Laura spent in that place was an eternity of suffering for her. As a father, his duty was to protect her, and he was failing miserably. Just then, Marcus's phone rang. It was Beatrice. "Marcus, I need to speak with Richard urgently. He doesn't want to talk to you. Tell him we've received a very interesting proposal from Anthony. A proposal that could change the rules of the game completely." Marcus looked at Richard, who motioned for him to pass the phone. "Richard," Beatrice said, "Anthony wants to have a special meeting tomorrow. A meeting where you will learn the whole truth about your family, and where you can see Laura one last time before you make your final decision." The address Beatrice provided led to a sleek corporate office in Midtown. Richard arrived with Marcus, both of them tense and ready for anything. Cole had stayed outside, monitoring for any unusual activity, and prepared to call for backup if needed. The building was modern, with discreet but visible security. When they reached the 12th floor, they were met by a man in a suit who led them through silent corridors to a conference room with a panoramic view of the city. Anthony was there, but not alone. Besides Beatrice, there were 3 other people Richard recognized with growing shock: Dr. Henry Morgan, the geneticist who had done the DNA test, Catherine, his cousin, and, surprisingly, Robert Davis, his personal accountant for the last 10 years. "Richard?" Anthony stood up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming. I know you must be confused by everything that's happened in the last few days." "Where is Laura?" "She's fine. In fact, she's here in the building, a few floors down. But before you see her, we need to have a very important conversation." Richard scanned each face in the room, trying to grasp the extent of the conspiracy. "All of you? You're all a part of this?" Dr. Morgan was the first. to speak. "Richard, the DNA test I performed wasn't fake. Laura really is your daughter, but there are aspects of the situation you don't understand." "What aspects?" Anthony gestured for Richard to sit, but he remained standing, tense. "Richard, our family built a $200 million fortune over 3 generations, but you've never shown any real interest in managing or growing that wealth." "I never needed to. The company runs itself. The investments perform." "They perform because we make them perform," Catherine interrupted. "While you were isolating yourself in your mansion, mourning Eleanor, we kept the businesses thriving." Robert opened a folder of financial documents. "In the last 3 years, we've made decisions that have increased your net worth by 60%, decisions you never even knew were made. You've been managing my fortune without my knowledge." "With your knowledge," Anthony corrected. "You signed documents I brought to you, remember? Always saying it was boring accounting stuff you didn't need to worry about." The memory hit Richard like a punch. It was true. During the years of depression after the accident, Anthony had frequently shown up with papers to sign, documents he signed without reading, trusting his cousin completely. "So, you've had control over my fortune for 3 years?" "Operational control, yes, but not total legal control." Beatrice stepped forward. "For that, we would need you to die or be declared legally incompetent, or to voluntarily transfer power." "And Laura? Why involve a child in all of this?" Anthony sighed as if the question saddened him. "Laura is genuinely your daughter, Richard, but she is also an opportunity. With you out of the way, she would inherit everything, and as a minor, she would need legal guardians. You, us, people who have already proven capable of managing the fortune efficiently." Richard felt sick as he realized the coldness of the plan. "You want me to disappear so you can use my daughter as a puppet?" Dr. Morgan stepped forward. "Richard, we're not asking you to die. We're offering you a comfortable retirement. You sign the documents transferring administrative power, receive a generous lifetime stipend, and you can live peacefully with Laura. But without control over my own fortune. Without the responsibilities of managing it," Catherine corrected. "You never liked the business side of things anyway." "And if I refuse?" Anthony exchanged glances with the others before answering. "Richard, you suffered a traumatic accident 3 years ago. You've been in psychiatric treatment, socially isolated, showing signs of severe depression. What does that have to do? It would be very easy to get you declared mentally incompetent, especially considering your recent erratic behavior, embracing an unknown child, believing in fanciful stories about conspiracies." The threat was clear. If he didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would use legal means to have him declared incompetent. "Where is Laura?" Richard repeated, his voice thick with cold anger. "On the 20th floor. There's a special room where she's learning about her new situation." "What kind of room?" Beatrice smiled coldly. "A room where children can be educated about complex realities. Laura is discovering that daddies sometimes have to make difficult choices between money and their daughters." Richard felt pure rage course through his veins. "You're psychologically torturing a 7-year-old child." "We're educating her on how the world really works," Anthony said calmly. "It's better she learns early." Marcus, who had remained silent until now, stood up. "Richard, we can't let this continue." "Marcus is also part of our group," Anthony revealed casually. "He's been feeding us information on your every move for years." Richard turned to his brother, incredulous. "Marcus?" Marcus avoided his gaze. "Richard, I needed to clear some debts. They offered me a way to do it." "You sold out your own brother." "I never wanted it to come to this. When I learned about Laura, when I saw how you bonded with her." Marcus swallowed hard. "I tried to convince them to stop." Anthony laughed. Marcus developed inconvenient feelings, started questioning our methods. "Is that why you brought him here today? So he could see what happens to those who question you?" "Exactly." Richard looked around the room, realizing he was completely surrounded by people he had considered family and friends. The betrayal was so profound it almost paralyzed him. "I want to see Laura now." "Of course," Anthony said, pressing a button on the intercom. Bring the girl up." A few minutes later, the door opened and Laura entered, accompanied by a woman Richard didn't know. The girl was visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Richard, she ran to him. "Dad, they said you weren't coming." Richard hugged her tightly, feeling her tremble in his arms. "I'm here, sweetie. Dad's here. They showed me papers saying you like money more than me." "That's not true, Laura. Nothing is more important than you." Anthony watched the interaction with clinical interest. "Richard, this is your last chance. Sign the documents and you two can leave together. If you refuse..." "If I refuse?" "Laura will go back to the special room, and this time she'll stay there until she fully understands that her father abandoned her for money." Laura looked between Richard and Anthony, clearly confused and terrified. "Dad, what do they want?" "They want Dad to sign some papers, Princess." "Then sign them, Dad. I just want to go home." The simplicity of Laura's request broke Richard's heart. She didn't understand that signing meant losing control over everything that could protect her in the future. "Richard," Dr. Morgan said softly, "don't make this harder than it has to be. Sign the papers. You go home. Everyone is happy. Except you'll have control over $200 million. Money that will be well managed and will secure Laura's future." Richard looked at his daughter, who was watching him with complete trust. She believed he could fix anything. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes there are no right choices, only less wrong ones? "Dad is going to sign the papers," he said finally. The relief on Laura's face was immediate, but when Richard looked at Anthony, he saw something in his cousin's eyes that chilled him to the bone, something that suggested that even if he cooperated, they had no intention of honoring the deal. "Excellent decision," Anthony said, pushing a stack of documents across the table. "Sign here, here, and here." As Richard picked up the pen, he realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from rage, because he had just realized that this whole charade was just that, a charade. They never intended to let him leave with Laura, and that meant he needed a completely different plan. Richard held the pen over the first document, feigning hesitation. A quick glance confirmed his suspicions. These weren't just administrative transfers, but complete assignments of assets. "Dad?" Laura tugged on his sleeve. "Is everything okay?" "It is, Princess." He kissed the top of her head, whispering, "When Dad says now, you run under that table." Richard began to sign with deliberate slowness, scanning the room. Anthony was relaxed, confident. Catherine was checking her phone. Beatrice was organizing papers. "Richard," Anthony said impatiently, "can we speed this up?" "Just making sure I understand everything." Richard turned a page. "This clause about Laura's guardianship, it's for Laura's protection. Stop stalling and sign." At that moment, Richard's phone vibrated. A text from Cole. "Ready. Awaiting your signal." When he reached the third document, Richard paused. "Why do you need access to my personal account that only has $100,000 in it?" Robert swallowed hard. "It's standard protocol, Richard." "How long have you known about this conspiracy, Robert?" The accountant glanced nervously at Anthony. Since your parents died." "My parents' accident? Was that planned, too?" The silence was deafening. "Richard," Dr. Morgan said, "you're developing paranoid thoughts. Like the theory that my cousin orchestrated all of this for 15 years? Anthony stood up. "Enough. Either you sign now, or Laura goes back to the special room." "No." Richard stood, pulling Laura behind him. "I'm not signing." Anthony pressed the intercom. "Security to the conference room." He refused. 2 security guards entered the room. "Laura will stay with us until you reconsider," Anthony said coldly. "Dad!" Laura clung to Richard's leg. "Now!" Richard yelled. Laura scrambled under the table. Richard shouted, "FBI! Everybody freeze!" "You're bluffing," Anthony said, his voice wavering. "Dr. Cole is recording everything. Kidnapping, extortion, threatening a minor. How many years in prison is that?" Robert collapsed into a chair. "I never wanted it to come to this. When I found out you killed Richard's parents..." "Shut up!" Anthony screamed, but it was too late. The confession was out. Marcus stood up. "That's it. I'm not letting you hurt Richard and Laura." "Marcus, you're one of us," Catherine hissed. "Not anymore." At that moment, the door burst open. Dr. Cole entered with 4 FBI agents. "FBI! Nobody move!" Catherine tried to run. Beatrice shouted protests. Dr. Morgan tried to shred documents. Robert was sobbing, begging for forgiveness. Anthony remained calm, looking at Richard with pure hatred. "You think this is over? We have people in places you can't even imagine." "But it will last long enough for me to protect Laura." Laura crawled out from under the table and ran to Richard. "Dad, is it okay now?" "It is, my princess." As he watched Anthony being handcuffed, Richard knew the fight wasn't over. But now he had something worth fighting for. "Dr. Cole, how much of this network have you mapped out?" "About 60%. But some powerful people are going to try to bury this. So the fight isn't over." "It's just beginning." Richard hugged Laura. "Dad, are we going home now?" "Yes, sweetie. We're going home." As they descended with the agents, Richard looked at Marcus. "Thanks for switching sides. I have a lot to make up for. You did the right thing when it mattered." "Dad," Laura asked, "are the bad people not going to bother us anymore?" "If they try, we'll be ready." And for the first time in 3 years, Richard felt truly alive. 6 months after, the arrests. Richard watched Laura play on the beach in the Hamptons with Honey, the golden retriever they had adopted. Moving to the smaller house by the sea had been one of his best decisions. Away from the mansion filled with painful memories, he and Laura could build a life that was truly their own. "Dad!" Laura ran up, Honey at her heels. "Look what she learned." She threw a small ball, which Honey fetched and brought right back. His phone rang. It was Marcus. "Good news. The judge approved the return of the last 15 million. You've recovered practically everything." "And the criminal case?" "Anthony got 20 years, Catherine 15, Beatrice 12. The network has been dismantled. 62 people indicted." "Thanks for everything, Marcus." After hanging up, Richard watched Laura. She was completely different from the scared little girl of 7 months ago. Her smile was now genuine, constant. "Dad," Laura came closer, "can I ask you an important question?" "Of course, Princess." "Are you happy now?" "Why do you ask?" "Because at the beginning, when you smiled, your eyes were still sad. But now your eyes smile too." "Yes, Laura. I'm happier than I've been in the long time. Even with all the bad things that happened, especially because of them, because they brought me you." Laura climbed into his lap. "I remember Mom every day, but I'm not sad anymore." "Why not?" "Because she brought me to you, and now I have a dad who really loves me." "You saved me, Laura. When Elena died, I stopped wanting to live, but you reminded me that there were still reasons to be happy." "So we saved each other?" "I think we did." A new housekeeper, Sophia, appeared. "Mr. Sterling, Dr. Cole is here. He said he has some important news." Cole arrived with a folder. "Richard, we found something that will change your perspective on everything." He handed him an old envelope. "This was in a safe deposit box of Elena's, letters she wrote throughout your marriage." Richard opened it and read the first letter, dated 2 months after their wedding. "It's been 2 months since I married Richard under false pretenses, but it's impossible not to love a man who is so genuinely good." The letters documented the evolution of Elena's feelings, her guilt over deceiving Richard, and her decision to confess everything. "She was planning to tell me everything," Richard murmured. "She had scheduled a talk for the week after the accident." The last letter read, "If anything happens to me, I want Richard to know that every day by his side was a blessing. Our love became the most real thing in my life. Laura is the greatest gift I can leave him." "She loved me," Richard said with relief, "deeply, and she regretted how it all began." When Cole left, Richard stayed to watch the sunset with Laura. "Dad, look how beautiful the sky is." The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink and gold. "You know what I've learned, Laura? Sometimes the most beautiful things come after the hardest storms. Like us?" "Like us." Laura snuggled up beside him. "Dad, I love you so much. More than sunflowers love the sun." "I love you too, Princess. Forever." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Richard felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but it had led him to what mattered: a second chance at happiness, a daughter who loved him unconditionally, and the certainty that true love always finds a way. Laura fell asleep beside him. He wanted to stay there, watching his daughter sleep peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would be another happy day in the lives they had rebuilt together. The future was full of infinite possibilities. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Richard and Laura has touched your heart. If you were moved by the courage of a father discovering a daughter he never knew he had, and the strength of a little girl who found true love amidst so much suffering, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, showing that true wealth isn't in money, but in the bonds of love we build, the courage to protect those we love, and the strength we find in each other to overcome the greatest adversities. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the values that truly matter in life.